everyone, and welcome to our first chapter of Magnus Carlsen's Endgame course. In this very first chapter, we will be covering pawn endgames. Pawn endgames are the core endgames, as many endgames can result in pawn endgames after, of course, a sufficient number of exchanges. The tricky and probably the hardest part of pawn endgames is that they are very concrete, and because of that, the calculation ability is very important in them. Also, some general evaluations as white is slightly better or much better do not apply for pawn endgames. In pawn endgames, there is only evaluation such as white is won, that is, one side is won, or the position is drawn. So because of that, they are very concrete. So it can be said that pawn endgames are mathematically predetermined. However, there are some key principles in pawn endgames which can help us, which can serve us as guidelines and navigate us in our decision making. We will start this chapter with a very simple position which arose in the game between Firuzia Alireza as white and Magnus Carlsen as black. The game was played in Norway 2021. In this game, Firuzia as white was was under pressure during the bigger part of the game. However, he defended quite well and managed to reach a drawn pawn endgame, which we have on the board, and white is on the move. However, under time pressure, he eventually made a blunder and lost the game, unfortunately for him. So let's see how Carlsen managed to trick his opponent and win this drawn position. So white is on the move, and he played here king h3, which is the best move and the only move which holds the draw. With this move, white holds the opposition, and the opposition is a situation where both kings face each other, as we have right now, and the side that is on the move, in this case black, has to give up the opposition and with it allow enemy's king to obtain important squares. In general, holding opposition allows weaker side to hold the draw and a stronger side to win. So it's one of the most important, if not the most important, concept in pawn endgames. There are several types of opposition. So we have the direct one, diagonal, and distant opposition. We will go through all of them during this chapter. Currently on the board we have an example of direct opposition, where both kings are on the same file or rank. In this case, the both kings are on the H file, and there is only one square between them. We will see, as I said, we will see the other examples of opposition later on. After king h3, black played king h6. First, let's see what would happen if white played, instead of king h3, the losing move, king f3. This would lose, as we said. This wouldn't hold the position, and it would allow black king to advance further on the king side. So after king f3, black can play king h4. White plays king f2, king g4. As we can see, black is threatening to go to f4 and attack this e4 pawn, so white has to play king e3. But after king g3, as we can see, here it's black king who holds the direct opposition, so white's king has to allow its colleague to advance. White can play, for example, king e2, king f4, attacking the pawn, king e3, and after king f3, we can see that white loses his pawn, his king cannot go to d4, and this pawn on e4 will fall, and black will easily win with his two pawns. So because of that, As we said, king h3 is the only move. After this, Carlsen played king h6. If he immediately plays king g5, then white simply keeps the position with king g3, and black is not able to advance further on the king side. He can try something like f5, e takes f5, king takes f5, king f3, and we have a typical position that can occur in pawn endgames. Here the weaker side easily holds the draw with the opposition. For example, black can play e4 check, king e3, king e5, king e2, king d4, king d2, e3 check, king e2, king e4. And now we have a very important and critical position. Here white has to place his king in such a manner that he can hold a position after black moves his king. And he does that with the move king e1, excellent move. So with this move, white can keep the opposition no matter what black plays. For example, if he plays king d3, white can simply go king d1, and here black can give check e2, but after king e1 he has to play king e3, and here we have the stalemate, and the result is a draw. Of course, black can also go here on f3, but this doesn't change the situation, as white can simply go king f1, holding again the position. If in this position, which we said is the critical one, white plays king d1, which would be a horrible blunder, here it's the black who holds the position after king d3, and after king e1, e2, white is on the move, and this costs him the game. King f2, king d2, and black promotes his queen on the next move. So this was an example of what would happen on king g5. As we said, after king g3, this would be a more or less easy draw after f5. So because of that, Carlsen is trying to trick his opponent with king h6. He wants to go to the queen side through the center, and with this confuse his opponent. After king h6, white played king h4, holding the direct opposition, and now black plays king g7. And here we also have a very important moment. White plays king g3, excellent move, and here we have an example of distant opposition. Again, kings are facing each other, but this time we have odd number of squares between kings, and that's 3 squares between them in this case, but it can also be, for example, 5 squares between them. And now if each king step forward, we will just reach a direct opposition. So with king g3, white is holding a distant opposition. Black goes king f8, king f2, king e7, white plays king e2. You may wonder why he doesn't play king e3, still holding the distant opposition. But here, in this case, holding the opposition on the e file is not so important here, because there are pawns on the e file in front of the kings. And notice how this pawn on e4 is holding the square on d5, and this pawn on e5 is blocking, occupying that square for a black king. So on this line, on this file, the opposition is not so important. However, black king wants to advance to the c file. Because of that, white must be ready to hold the opposition once black king reaches the c file. So the most important thing to take away from this position is that white has to be ready to hold the opposition once black king reaches the c file. And that's what happened in the game. Here after king e2, Carlsen continued to maneuver a bit. He played king e8, king e3, king d7. So he decides to try his last resource. King d3, king d6, and here in this position Alireza in time trouble. He played king c3, which was a horrible blunder, which loses the game. Again, holding the distant opposition with king d2, as we said, holding the odd number of squares between kings was the only way leading to a draw. Now, if black plays king c5, white just replies with king c3, holding a direct opposition. Or if black plays king c6, king c2, we still have the distant opposition, and the position is a draw. Unfortunately, after king c3, Carlsen replied with king c5, and white realized his error, as now it's black who is holding the opposition, and white decided to resign in this position. If he plays, for example, king d3 here, black king just advances, king b4, king d2, king c4, threatening to go to king d4, so king d3 is more or less forced. King c3, again, the direct opposition, king f3, and now after king d3, again, white loses his e4 pawn, and the game is over. So that would be the first example of pawn endgames. This was a rather basic one, just to introduce some viewers to the principle of opposition, and to remind the more experienced one for that. We will continue with our next example, which is between Carlsen Magnus and Tari Aryan, played in World Cup 2023. This is another simple example, which highlights the importance of pawn endgames. As we can see here, white is an exchange up, so so technically this is not a pawn endgame, but it reached a pawn endgame very soon, and it's very important that white can intercept any black counterplay with the simple transition to pawn endgame. And that's exactly what happened in the game. Black played knight g6, attacking this pawn on h4, but after rook takes g6, excellent move, which is the simplest solution for white to win, white transforms into a won pawn endgames. Black king is simply too far away from the center, and he cannot fight for the opposition. After king takes g6, king takes b3, black realized hopelessness of his position, and here resigned. The play might have continued like king f5, king c4, king e5, king c5. So we can see once again white is holding the opposition. King e6, king d4, threatening to go after f4 pawn, king f5, king d5, king f6, king e4, and the pawn on f4 is lost, after which white easily wins. Let's see, for example, king e6, king takes f4, king f6, king e4, king e6, and now f4, advancing this passed pawn. King f6, f5, king f7, king e5, king e7, f6, king f7, king f5. And after king f8, king g6, white will take even h5 pawn, and with the two pawns he will easily win this position. So this was another simple example how pawn endgames are important, because we can use some factors which can be beneficial for us to transfer the some position which is not a pawn endgame into a won pawn endgame for us. Now let's take a look at another example of this. This was played in the game Carlsen Magnus against Hracek-Zbinek in Bundesliga 2006-2007. And this is a variation from the actual game. We will see the actual game in the chapter Rook Endgames, and the game will be detailedly analyzed there. So here white is on the move, and he again uses the fact that the pawn endgames is 1 for him, and he plays rook d8 here, sacrificing his b pawn, but in doing so he manages to exchange rooks and transfer and reach up one pawn endgame, as black is not able to keep their position, as white's king is much better, that is active, and his pawn structure is also better. If he plays rook e8 with the same idea of exchanging rooks on the e7 square, this would be a terrible mistake, because black can first give check, rook b6, check, kicking away white's king, and only after king f5 he takes on b7, and white is unable to exchange rooks, and the position is equal. So this would be a big mistake, but of course white plays rook d8. Now when black plays rook b6 check, white can simply play rook d6, covering his king from the check. Black is forced to take on b7, and now after rook d7, rook takes d7, king takes d7, we have the one pawn endgame. Here black can try king f7. If he plays king h7, trying to keep distant opposition, as we saw from the previous examples, here white can play king d6 and use the fact that black's king cannot occupy the h6 square, which he is required to do in order to keep the distant opposition, and because he is unable to do so, he loses this position. For example, after king g8 or king g7, king e7, again distant opposition, and now after king g6, king f8, this is another important motive. So white is transferring his position into the position where he goes, where he occupies, where he advances in black's camp from behind. And we will reach this position from the main variation. So as we said, instead of king g7, black can play king g8, but this just postpones the inevitable. So after king e6, attacking the pawn, king g7, king e7, once again we have this position, king g6, king f8, we again reach the position which will also occur in the main line. So after from this position, black plays king f7, king d6, king g6, king e6, king g7, king e7, once again this position, king g6, and king f8. As we said, white king is infiltrating from behind. Here black plays h5. If he plays king h7, then after king f7 he simply loses these pawns. Sorry, so that is no better. After h5, white takes on h5 check, king takes on h5, and now king g7, attacking the pawn on f6, which black is not able to defend. And after g4, for example, f takes g4, king takes g4, or for example king g5, king f7, and black king is in Zugzwang. So king takes g4, king takes f6, king takes g3, and after king takes e5, white wins this easily. He will just step away with his king and march his pawn to the promotion square. Now let's take a look what would happen if in the initial position black didn't have his h-pawn. So this is the position, the exact position from the previous example, but with the only difference that now black king has this h6 square available for his king, and surprisingly, without this pawn, the position is equal. Now as we saw, black plays king h7, excellent move, holding the distant opposition. And now on king d6 he can play king h6, excellent move. And this is the main difference, which makes the draw possible for black. Here, if white plays king e7, king g7, king e6, king d6, he achieves nothing. So after king h6, he may try, for example, king d5, but here black plays king g7. So the only he has to be careful only to be able to hold direct opposition once black king reaches the e6 square, or to be able to keep the distant opposition if white crosses this on the 6th rank. So, for example, if he goes king c6, we play king g6, again keeping the distant opposition, and white cannot make any progress here. After king c5, king d7 is the right move, or king h7, but not king f7, which would be a horrible blunder, as now after king d6, excellent move, black king cannot go to d6, and he loses this position. For example, king d6, after king f8, king e6, king g7, king e7, king g6, king f8, we have the well-known position from the previous example. So after king d6, king g6, king e6, king g7, king e7, we nonetheless reach the same position, king g6, king f8, and white wins. So after king c5, king g7 is the right move, as we said. And after king d5, king h7, black just, as we said, he's waiting for white king, but waiting for him in such a manner that he can counter king e6 with king g6, and counter king d6, for example, with king h6, keeping the distant opposition, or king c6 with king g6, once again keeping the odd number of squares between king. So, as we can see, white is unable to make any progress. The only resource he has in this position is to try to make use of his extra pawn. But in order to do so, he has to go back with his king, king c4, king g7, king d3, king f7, king e3, king e6. So while white king was going back in order to support this pawn break on f4, black simply activates his king, and the activity of his king will allow him to hold the position. Now, after f4, black can play king d6, and this is the most simple solution. So he wants to activate his king, keeping the status quo on the king side. However, he can also make a draw with g takes f4, g takes f4, e takes f4, king takes f4, and now the only move here is king e7, excellent move. The idea is that king f5 can be reached with king f7, and this also leads to a draw. After g5, for example, f takes on g5, king takes on g5, king e7, king f4, king f6, we have the basic drawn position we had in the first example. After king takes f4, it's worth noting that king f7 would be a big mistake, and after this white is winning. After king e5, the point is that after king e7 or king g7, g5 wins. So after king e7, white plays e5, excellent move, and after f takes e5, king takes e5, it is white who is holding the opposition, and after king f7, king e5, king g7, king g5, excellent move, black has to allow white king to advance, and after king h7, king f6, this is a well-known lost position for black. King g8, for example, g5, king h7. As we said, if black plays king f8, then after g6, king g8, g7, he has to let white's king advance, and after king h7, king f7, white promotes his queen. So after king g8, g5, king h7 is slightly more tricky. White plays king f7, excellent move. G6 would slip, would let the victory slip away, as after king h8, excellent move, white cannot go with his king to f7, as this would lead to a stalemate. And after g7, king g8, he still has to play king g6, also leading to a stalemate. So instead of allowing this, after king h7, he plays king f7, and after king h8, he goes king g6, king g8, king h6, and after king h8, g6, king g8, g7, he is able to kick black's king from the corner, and after king f7, king h7, he promotes his queen. So I just wanted to show you this position, which is also very typical, that after king takes f4, black has to play king e7 in order to be able to meet king f5 with king f7, and this leads to a draw. But as we said, after f4, there is no need to complicate life. King d6 is much more easier draw. And now after f takes g5, f takes g5, king d3, king c5, king c3, king b5. The pawn on e5 is controlling d4 squares, so white king cannot advance through that, and black king is holding all these squares on queen side. After king b5, king b3, king c5, now it's black who is threatening to invade white's position, so after king c5, white has to repeat moves with king c3. And we will stop this, we will split our chapter here. So this first part of pawn endgames were some basic pawn endgames. In the second part, we are going to analyze two much more critical positions from the Carlsen's practice. See you then. Bye.